So it has become somewhat popular to talk about plastics and how they are harmful to us, and everyone suggests that we should drink or eat from other materials, but no one really warns us about those other materials as well. And so I have done my own research to showcase that not only plastics can cause harm, but other materials as well. But before we jump into that, I have a quick fact which I want to mention. I have came across it when I was listening to a podcast, and for some reason it never occurred to me that how can a paper cup hold water? And that is because it contains plastic. It contains a polymer which is plastic. And he even talked about, the scientist in the podcast, that it releases even more microplastics than normal plastic. And that is most likely the case for paper straws as well. So you have to be careful when you go into a shop and you buy, I don't know, some sort of a takeaway coffee or something like that. You have to keep this in mind. It was very surprising for me, but yeah. So let's get straight into the actual content of this lesson. When you don't want to drink or you want to avoid plastics, there are two other options that you can choose from. The first one is metals and the second one is glass. And I would most likely recommend glass because that's, I believe, is the safest option. As you can see, this is the first thing which has popped up. The safety of glass has been demonstrated in many studies and is generally recognized as safe by governments and legislation. And that is the truth. I don't think there is any hidden lie in this. But if you look at glass in detail, you will see that it's not like glass itself. It also contains other chemicals so that it will hold the shape, so that it will be more durable, so that it will look better and so on. And so here there was a study done or something like that, and they have shown that there are 3 other chemicals which are used, which are cadmium, lead and chromium. And I have searched those 3 substances up before I get into what they actually do to our bodies. So what are they used for in glass? So lead is added in order to reduce the temperature of the molten material and so on. Yeah, but that is not important to us. But it provides an improved look to the finished product through increasing the refractive index and density of the glass, making it clearer, less flawed substance. And that is actually somewhat similar to cadmium. It improves the appearance and durability. So they are somewhat similar. And so what they do to our bodies, that's even more interesting. So if we breathe high levels of cadmium, it damages our lungs and it can cause death. And exposure to low levels of cadmium in air, food and water. So when the substance is located in the food and water itself, but also when it's stored in that sort of material which contains cadmium, it actually then releases cadmium into that food or water, and that can cause disease in our kidneys as well as fragile bones. And even more surprising is that cadmium is considered a cancer-causing agent. So why would someone use cadmium in something that we use on daily basis and something that we actually consume from? And as for lead, it's actually also very similar. It increases the risk of high blood pressure, cardiovascular problems and kidney damage. As you can see, kidney damage, that's what I meant by similar. And another fact is that exposure of pregnant women to high levels of lead can cause miscarriage, stillbirth, premature birth and low birth weight, which is very concerning when you think about it. And so these are the substances or chemicals which are used in glass, in the production of glass and so on. It's horrifying when you think about it, and no one talks about it. That's even more horrifying. Everyone talks about how you should avoid plastics, but no one talks about the harmfulness of glass itself. But it's not like all the glass is harmful. As we saw in here, of course it's not generally true for all the glass, but there are companies which produce actually healthy glass, which doesn't release these chemicals into our foods or drinks. And so what you have to do, and that is actually the main point of this lesson, is that you should always check the materials that you are buying, like what are they made of, what they contain, what kind of company made those, and don't always choose the cheapest option, because that most likely contains these sort of chemicals which can be very harmful to our bodies. And so that is for glass. But also when it comes to you choosing what kind of glass bottle you want to buy, you don't only look at what like the glass contains, such as these chemicals, but also look at whether the glass is colored or it has some sort of a lining or coating, because that can contain even more harmful chemicals. And so the most ideal option would be for you to buy a clear glass, so that it doesn't contain any sort of chemicals to make it change its color and so on. And so that's for glass. You can do your own research and go more into depth, but here I just want to provide quick value so that you can take the action right away. And that's not only for glass. Metals can also be harmful. I have found an interesting website which actually contains all the information which I wanted to mention about metals. And that is, for example, when we are talking about utensils which you use for cooking and so on, that they can be very harmful as well, because it differs whether you buy a stainless steel or whether you buy an aluminium bottle and so on. So you have to be careful. As I mentioned, with glass you always have to check what this, in this case the metal, is made from, what kind of chemicals it contains, what company makes it, and so on. In the case of company, what I mean by that is that whether it lies to the customers that it doesn't contain any sort of harmful chemicals, but it actually does. And so don't go by the shiny coating. Well, basically this is what I mentioned with glass as well, that if it has any sort of coating, there is a high chance that it will release chemicals to your food whilst you are cooking. Or if you have a bottle which is made of steel and it has some sort of a coating, that it can actually release those chemicals into your drink. So you have to be careful about that. Also for aluminum, it can be very dangerous as well, because those chemicals can affect your immune system, and they are released when they are in contact with acidic vegetables and foods. Also, when you look at brass, I wasn't sure what brass meant, so I searched it up, and it meant a yellow alloy of copper and zinc. So it's a combination of copper and zinc. It can be also very harmful, so you have to be careful, because it also easily reacts to salt, acidic foods, and also to heat. So keep this in mind as well. Then, as for stainless steel, that is like the most common when you look at cookware or when you look at like bottles and whatnot. But people are not aware of the fact that stainless steel, as most of the other materials as well, is actually a mixture of chromium, nickel, silicon and carbon. And it's also true that it doesn't react to acid foods as other materials we have looked at, but you have to check the quality, because if it's not created in the right way, it can be very harmful. So it's again the same point that I am always talking about. I have mentioned it in the video which I have made before, and I am mentioning it again. Always check like what the company is, always check how it was made, what it was made from, and so on, if it is healthy or not for you. Always check it. Do your own research before you buy anything. Don't go in there and listen blindly to the advice other people in my niche are giving, that you shouldn't drink from plastic bottles, which is completely something you should do. But also, when they recommend you to buy stainless steel bottle or glass bottle, always make sure to check how that bottle was made, whether the material contains other chemicals which can be released into the drink or food that you intake. Always do your research. I cannot state how important that is. Always think critically before you buy anything. And apparently what the website is telling us is that iron is the best choice you can make. And I haven't made my own study about that yet. The most important part of this lesson, as I mentioned, is that even if you avoid plastics, which is something you definitely should do, as I mentioned, you should always make sure if you buy a glass bottle or a metal one, that whether it contains any sort of chemicals, always avoid any sort of coating or lining or any sort of color which they add to it, because most likely that will be the thing which is actually harmful. Always choose the clear ones without any sort of coloring or decorative features and so on. And so hopefully this lesson was valuable. Hopefully you will take the steps which I have mentioned in this video, that you should make your own research. And if you have found this video valuable, then you can watch this video next.